One of the most beautiful things about the Catholic Church, I think, is obviously the universality of it. Catholic means universal. And one of the things that's just really cool about this is you can go to Mass wherever you want to in the world, and for the most part, you know what's going on. Maybe you've experienced going to a Mass in a different language, maybe in Spanish or in French or in Arabic or in Luxembourgish, whatever type of language that is, right? But you can always follow along the basic structure for the most part. And so that's an amazing part about being Catholic. However, we've also encountered churches we've gone into, maybe the same language that we speak, maybe English, and although we may be able to follow the basic structure of the Mass, there just seems to be something off about it. Maybe it's that we don't exactly feel welcomed in a church. And that, of course, is a travesty. That is a great disservice to the church. We're called to be welcoming. We're called to welcome anyone in. You know, a couple years ago, actually, when I was a deacon, I had the opportunity to go to Ars, France. I went on a week-long retreat to Ars, France. Where's Ars? It's in the middle of nowhere. That's where it is. So much in the middle of nowhere, when John Vianney on his way was there, he got lost. He couldn't find his own location he was supposed to go to. Of course, the famous line is a boy pointed him to Ars, and he said, "You have shown me Ars, I will show you the way to heaven." So that's what he did. So I spent a week in Ars, and the Lord was very, very generous to me in the sense on the way there in Paris, they lost my luggage for a week. So I was in Ars with the same exact clothes that I was wearing the whole week. In many ways, I fit into the French community really well, actually. But eventually, I really wanted new clothes, and in France, I don't exactly have my sizes, I guess I figured out. But as I was there, every single day, I would just go and pray in the town of Ars. I'd go to the church that John Vianney helped build and actually had a renovation go on as well. And I think I started getting known to the townspeople as that homeless-looking person who prayed a lot and did not speak any French. The only word I know is bonjour, how was your day, from Beauty and the Beast. That's all I knew in French. And so sure enough, every single day I'd be in the town praying and walking around and just really embracing a really great silent retreat. Although I really didn't know how to talk to anyone. Every once in a while an American priest would stop by for a couple hours, so I'd talk to them. And there was one occasion where there's some American priests there, and they say that I heard tonight at 9 o'clock, there's going to be a special Mass in the main church of Ars. There's this big church they had built for the year of the priest, and the bishop was going to be there. And so they said, you should go to that Mass. So I went to that Mass at 9 o'clock at night. Of course, those priests were concelebrating, and I was a deacon, and I just did not feel comfortable deaconing a Mass in a language I did not know. So I just kind of sat in the pews. And the Mass happened. It was beautiful. The bishop was there. And it was basic form. It was a basic Mass. But afterwards, everyone sat down immediately, and they stuck around. And so, well, this is interesting. What's happening? So I sat down. And for the next 2 hours, there was this prayer service that happened after the Mass. And I could pick up bits and pieces of it. You know, one time was the rosary. I knew that. I saw them break out the beads. I knew how to do that. At one time, I'm pretty sure they're doing Lectio Divina, so going deeper into the scriptures. There were some songs they were singing in French, and I kind of fell asleep, I'm sure, is what I did, right? And then all of a sudden, there was a time where people started walking forward. And they grab a piece of paper out of like a bucket almost, like a hat, not a hat, but a bucket, some sort of nice basket maybe. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on now. So I just kept seated in my pew. Well, sure enough, the family in front of me realized I wasn't getting up. And they had come back to the pew, and so the man got up out of his pew and came around and sat next to me, which I'm sure he was thinking, cool, now I'm sitting next to the homeless-looking guy, right? But he sat next to me, and in his broken English, he tried to speak French, and that was a complete waste, right? So in his broken English, he says, "Go forward." So I stood up, I went up, and I drew a piece of paper out of the basket. I said, this is weird, right? And I went back to the pew, and I sat down, and I opened it up, and it was a name in French. If I remember right, the name was Saint Mark. He had to say it for me. Saint Mark. He opened up the Bible and pointed towards Mark, and I was able to see that. And then he goes, "Saint, pray for you this year." So it was the saint who was going to pray for me that year. It was an amazing thing. But even the more amazing thing I found was that he reached out. That he got out of his pew He saw a visitor who had no idea what was going on, and he left his own comfort zone and went and ministered to the visitor. After that prayer service, it was about 12:15 in the morning. Once again, it was New Year's Eve, so that was New Year's. And he says, "Come, come, come." And so I followed him. And we went out into the street of Ars, and there was a whole group of people moving, and it was like almost out of a movie, where it's, a European community, and the whole community is moving at once, and I was part of this crowd moving, and I had no idea where I was going. For about 10 minutes, we walked through Ars, and I was just walking, saying, this is kind of interesting, but okay. And I followed them, and the next thing I know, I'm in an upper room of this building. I'm having cheese, I'm having great wine as well. I said, this is great, this is amazing, this is awesome. This family took me in, and they walked with me. And they brought me to a French party, which I would never found on my own. I would have went to bed, right, instead. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was part of that community. So the next couple of days that I was in Ars, people started recognizing me. When I was at Mass, they weren't as afraid of me anymore. They'd even smile at me. Imagine that Frenchman smiling at an American, right? It happened, and I think the reason why was because they saw me now being part of their community. Let's go back to the scriptures today. Acts chapter 9, verse 26 and 27. When Saul arrived in Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was a disciple. What does this mean? Saul is going to Jerusalem. Paul is going to Jerusalem. His conversion has happened, and he wants to join the church, the disciples, the church, the followers of Christ. And yet they're afraid of him. And so what happens? Then Barnabas took charge of him and brought him to the apostles. I love that saying. Barnabas took charge of him and brought him to the apostles. He reached out, he welcomed him in, and he brought him around and introduced him to the early church disciples. He brought him to the apostles and said, "You have to meet Paul. He's converted. He is a great asset to us." And it was Barnabas taking charge. We as a parish, if we continue to focus on evangelization, also have to focus on being welcoming. I preached about this when I first came here to St. John's, and we responded so well, and hopefully we continue to do this as well. But it's always a good reminder to remind ourselves that we are called to be welcoming to everyone who comes through these doors. What's a way we can be welcoming? It's actually very easy. When we recognize a new person in our church, and here at St. John's, it's always easy to recognize the visitor. It's those who, when it comes to the procession of gifts, have no idea what's going on. And they look around like, why are people bringing food up front? Those are the visitors, right? And their first reaction is this. I kid you not. They've told me. I've experienced this from visitors here. They go, "Father, that was weird." It is at first, isn't it? Remember your first time here, you're thinking, are they skipping the Eucharistic prayer? Are they receiving the Eucharist right now? What's going on? And it's not until we explain what's going on that we see it's not weird. It's actually very beautiful. What's going on, by the way, for all the visitors, now you're thinking, what's going on, Father, right? Well, what happens is we have procession during the offertory, the basket right here in the center for the Life Care Center, the food baskets for the ICA food shelf, and the other baskets for our offertory gift of money. And so when we recognize someone who's new here, what we should do after Mass is simply go up to them and say, "Hi, my name is John. It's so glad to meet you. Welcome to St. John's. What's your name? Where are you from? Do you have any questions about this parish? Can I explain that procession to you?" That's a great way to be welcoming. How else can we be welcoming? We're going to experience this with the church renovation when we move the church into the gathering place. The pews are not going to be as wide, and so it's going to be a little tighter as well. Well, a great way to be welcoming then is probably not always sitting at the end of the pew and making people crawl over you. I know it sounds funny at first, but a very welcoming thing is saying, "Yeah, I'll move to the center, even though it's not my normal spot. It's not my pew." There's certain parishes I've been at where people literally kick people out of their pew. "You're sitting in my pew." Yeah, that's really welcoming, right? Not at all, right? So instead, okay, so someone's sitting in your pew. Praise God, they're here. Don't be like, "I can't believe they're in my seat." No, if you're in my seat, I might have an issue. by the way, right? What's another way? I read about this. They go, one of the hardest things is when someone gives another person, it's called the stink eye. What does a stink eye mean? Maybe a child's making noise. Maybe someone walks in late, and all of a sudden it's like this. I can't believe that child's making noise. And we all stare at that person. That's called the stink eye. We're great at it in Minnesota, aren't we? Right? When we do this, it's not being welcoming at all. Instead, we should pray for that individual and pray for their children. How amazing it is that they're here. How beautiful. We're not called to ostracize them. We're not called to stare them down. How else can we be welcoming? It's inviting them into our own community, be it a Bible study, inviting them to hospitality after Mass, welcoming them in, walking a journey with them, taking charge, as Barnabas did as well. One of the hardest things to do is to join a new parish, especially if we left one that we've been active in before. Are we going to be welcomed in? Are they going to serve the needs that I have? Are they going to be cold to me? What are we called to do? We're called to be like Barnabas. We're called to not be scared of visitors, not to be scared of new people, but to see them the asset that they are to our community, to our parish, and to welcome them in, to walk with them. And this, of course, when we do this, we're bringing them to God, bringing them to the vine, which will continue to feed them as well. And so let's continue as a parish of St. John the Baptist to be a welcoming community, welcoming each and every person that comes through these doors.